I put John Herdman into FC24, but the twist is I have to use an MLS cap compliant roster. In episode 1, we went over the MLS roster rules, checked out the squad that John Herdman will inherit, selected our new team captain, and identified some free agent signings. This is what we're looking to accomplish in episode 2. We need to make some tough roster decisions, who is leaving the club and who is coming in, figure out what to do with the Italians, identify some players who could be projects for John Herdman, sign our new DPs, discuss how difficult it is to move players on and bring players in. Now let's check in with Alex and go over our updated roster.
We've already identified Julian Gressel as our first signing, but before we officially bring him in or look at anyone else, let's take a look at the roster, make some key initial decisions just to see where we're at in terms of roster space, what needs to be filled, what kind of space there is to work with, and just overall get a good assessment of where this roster build is at. So to begin, we had to clear out some names. So Frank Ibarra's loan from Atlanta was over. We sent him back to the US. Meanwhile, we bought out Adama Diomande with our one buyout, as we felt that his contract was best served if we just paid it out and then moved on. Meanwhile, Michael Bradley retired, so he's gone. Otherwise, we decided to decline the options on CJ Sapong, Christian Gutierrez, Greg Ranjit-Singh, Victor Vasquez, Luka Gavran, and Temi Antonoglu. Otherwise, getting a bit of ahead for the new season, we decided that Hugo Mbonge could go on loan to the Canadian Premier League, while Jordan Perutz and Luke Singh could be loaned back, of course, because they were already in the CPL. Meanwhile, Kosi Thompson, who was on loan in Norway, we assumed his purchase option would be triggered. Otherwise, in terms of some news of players coming in, or at least players already in the club, we decided that Jonathan Osorio would be bought down as a DP. Of course, he was a DP, but under the TAM threshold, so we decided to free up some space by doing that, while Ayo Akinola returned from his loan to the San Jose Earthquake and immediately fills one of our U22 initiative spots.
The roster is already changing, but we still haven't addressed the biggest elephant in the room, and that is the Italians. Should they stay or should they go? Now, I think it's fair to say that the Italians' time in MLS right now has not gone according to plan. The two players are on enormous wages. Federico Bernardeschi makes over $6 million a year, and Lorenzo Insigne makes over 15. Now, it's fine to make that much money as long as you're producing, but that's just simply not the case. Bernardeschi had 5 goals and 2 assists in 31 matches last campaign, and Insigne had 4 goals and 4 assists in 20. Those numbers look even worse, especially when you compare them to someone like Thiago Almada. Almada had 11 goals and 19 assists in 31 matches last campaign, and he only made a little over $2 million. Lucho Acosta is another player who's making a little over $2 million, and he had 17 goals, 14 assists in 32 matches. Now what's crazy is Almada and Acosta aren't even in the top 20 earners in MLS, while Insigne is number 2 and Bernardeschi is number 5. There's no denying it. Insigne and Bernardeschi are both very talented players, but they're severely underperforming right now in MLS, which means that we have to at least evaluate trying to move one or both of these contracts, and if it's even a possibility.
So because of their, at least in accordance with what they've produced this year in MLS, in accordance with their bloated salaries, I don't think you're going to find a lot of teams throughout MLS, throughout Europe, that are going to be banging down Toronto FC's door to try and get these players in a transfer. Toronto FC didn't have to pay transfer fees for those players, so that's good. But because of the, when you consider their age, when you consider how little they produced this season, it's going to be really hard to move on these players, and it's going to be hard to get these players to agree to transfers and find teams that can match their current salary demands, right? You're obviously going to think about places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, but are these places where these players want to go? I think it is more likely that Bernardeschi moves on than Insigne, and I say that for 2 reasons. I think there were some transfers that were very close to happening, and I think there were moments where it looked like Bernardeschi would be moved on from Toronto FC, and I think there were moments where he even went so far as to say goodbye to teammates. So I think there's probably more of a willingness. He also has a lower salary than Insigne, so there's a willingness for him to move. There's probably an interest for him to move, right? I think there's an understanding from him that it hasn't worked the way he's wanted to. Insigne is a tougher one for a few reasons. One, his salary is exorbitant, right? He's the second highest paid player in MLS behind, the greatest player of all time. It's very, very hard to move on from that salary. So there's that. I also think if you're Bill Manning, this is a central part to your project, your vision. And I think if you're Bill Manning, you really, really want to make the Lorenzo Insigne project work. He stuck his neck out, for the player. He went to the MLSE board and insisted that they had to get this player signed because he believed in what this player could produce on the field and the commercial impact he could have off the field. So I don't know if there's going to be as much willingness from Bill Manning to try and move on from this player as well. So when you factor in those two things, I'm not a betting man, but if I had to bet, I would bet on Insigne returning next year and Bernardeschi not returning next year. However, I could see a scenario where a team, steps up with a giant offer that makes the player happy and the team happy as well. And there's, both of those DPs don't return next year.
Clearly, it's going to be very difficult to move not only one, but both of these contracts. So I still think we need to understand the situation a little bit better, which is why I brought on MLS insider Tom Bogert to help us out to understand the Italians' market value, as well as which clubs would be interested in signing them.
I could answer this question very quickly. Could be one word, just how's their market value? Bad. It's difficult to get off of bad contracts. That's where Toronto FC are right now with those two players. Bernardeschi would have left in the summer. He's pushing to leave. He wanted to leave. The team wanted him to leave. Nobody wants to pick up his salary, right? There was some interest from what I heard. I don't have, the full story on all of this, so I don't know exactly what was overblown, what wasn't, but I do know that he wanted to leave. And again, I can tell you for sure that would have been something Toronto would have liked to accommodate if it was possible in any way. So it wasn't. I found out today that Lorenzo Insigne changed his agents. So now he has a third agency in 9 months or whatever. And the kind of, it was public last time he did it. And it was the easy thing to say, and the correct thing to say was, you usually change agents when you're looking to change clubs or whatever, right? So if you want to try to read between the lines, you might say, well, he still hasn't moved, and now he changed agents again, so is that what he was looking to do? I've heard differing things about their futures. A couple people have told me that they're pretty intent on still trying to make it work with Insigne, and then there's other things that you hear that, if they could get out of both, they would, but look, man, Saudi Arabia can't solve everybody's problems, man. If that's an option, who else in the world is going to match $15 million for Insigne and $7 million for Bernardeschi after not just the lack of production on the field, but everything that we've reported and everything that we know to be true of these two players kind of off the field in the culture sense. Why would anybody? And there is no bidding war, there is no interest, whatever, from a lot of teams. So even if you did talk yourself into wanting one of these players, why would you offer Toronto to cover all of the salary? Why wouldn't you say you can't pay somebody to get rid of them? Why would we pay all of their salary? Even if you're talking yourself into either one of these players, you're going to try to find a deal because there is absolutely no market.
Now, it's definitely going to be very difficult to move a contract like Bernardeschi's, so we thought of the swap deal, which is something that TFC has done very successfully in the past. We identified Mitch Batty as our main target, reached out to Fenerbahce to see if we can make the deal happen.
Batshuayi makes perfect sense because, TFC struggled at that number 9 position. Batshuayi has proven that he can score goals. He has over, 50 goals in the top 5 leagues. He scored in some top competitions. He has a lot of goals, a goal every other game for Belgium. Really, if it wasn't for Romelu Lukaku there, he'd be a star for Belgium. Yeah, that's kind of been the story of Batshuayi's career. He's always been second fiddle, third fiddle at clubs, even though he's gone in and produced, even if it means in limited minutes. And, that's no exception again at Fenerbahce. So we believe here by bringing him into TFC, making him the star man, making him the guy. He's always seemed to have a good attitude, a good perspective. He can really thrive by just getting that chance to star and not have to play behind someone. So I think by bringing someone in like Batshuayi, he'd make a lot of sense for both someone that Herdman can work with and the culture, but also a talented striker.
It took some tough negotiation, but we were able to move on the contract of Federico Bernardeschi, but now it is time for the true challenge. How on earth are we going to move the contract of Lorenzo Insigne?
Both parties might be taking a bit of a hit here, but Insigne has shown a desire to want to go back to Europe. For TFC, it might just make sense to eat a bit of pain financially to open up that valuable DP spot. And Lazio was decided to be the best fit. Maurizio Sarri, the coach there, is very familiar with Insigne. Insigne actually had his best seasons there under the Italian at Napoli. 47 goals, 38 assists across 3 seasons. That's an average of 15 goals a season, 12 and a half assists a season. So it could make sense for Insigne to go refine his form under Sarri, this time at Lazio. Lazio wants some winger depth there. They've struggling in league play. It makes a lot of sense for them to look at a winger like Insigne, especially if they maybe get a decent price with TFC wanting to move him on. So that deal just seems to make sense.
We somehow pulled it off as both Bernardeschi and Insigne have left the club. We already replaced one with Mitch Batty, but now it's time to sign another DP, so we are heading back to Turkey because Galatasaray has a bit of a bloated attack right now, and we're looking to poach Wilfred Zaha.
Wilfred Zaha makes a lot of sense as a designated player for Toronto. He's shown at his time at Crystal Palace that he can be a key leader on a team. He's very flexible, offensively. He can play anywhere across the front line, striker, winger, a little deeper as a second striker, number 10. I think those profile will fit very nicely under John Herdman. He's also shown that he can carry a team. At Crystal Palace, he had so much pressure and he'd perform, he'd execute. He looks like someone that's still hungry to win, and he's not old by any means. He's still on the edge of his prime and could really come to MLS and be a key piece for TFC. And really be a key leader, someone that maybe deflects some of the attention away from someone like Mitch Batty. He can just do his job, score goals like he's done, and Zaha can step up and be a bit more of that hub, that creative force. So he would make a lot of sense as a DP, especially you add in that he brings in that name brand value that someone like Batty also brought in.
It was difficult, but we were able to do it. We moved out Federico Bernardeschi and Lorenzo Insigne, and we signed Mitch Batty and Wilfred Zaha. But now it's time to get really clever with the U22 initiative, so in episode 3, we are heading to South America.